The battle for control of Marawi. The Philippine government has declared martial law in the southern Mindanao region, where its military has been battling ISIL-linked fighters. As rights groups express concern, what's behind this latest crisis? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Richelle Carey. For millions of Filipinos, the term martial law often conjures up the military rule of former leader Ferdinand Marcos. But the current president, Rodridgo Duterete, says it's necessary to put down ISIL-linked fighters in the southern region of Mindanao. The city of Marawi has been under siege by armed groups since a military raid on Tuesday. President Duterte has warned the Philippines is at grave risk of what he calls contamination by ISIL. Good to our guest to talk about this in a moment. First, though, Jamila Alandogan has this report.
In this video obtained by Al Jazeera, members of the Maute armed group appeared to be combat training in the hinterlands of Lanao province. The group was formed by two brothers, Omar and Abdullah Maute. Both were educated in the Middle East. They come from a powerful political clan in southern Philippines. The Maute group was initially formed as part of the family's private militia. But over the last few years, it has adopted a violent stance. Using symbols associated with ISIL, the Maute has specifically harassed and killed Christians in the area. And since last year, they have been raising ISIL's black flag in several government facilities. Since 2012, there have been reports that foreign fighters have joined them, and funding from abroad has started to flow in. It is estimated the Maute group has about 200 fighters. According to the Philippine military, most of the recruits have been attracted to join because of money and the influence of social media. But many here believe that there are also those who are attracted to the idea of revenge as a result of a vicious cycle of violence and displacement that has plagued Mindanao for decades.
You know, children in an evacuation center or children in remote areas who may have not felt the basic services that can be afforded to them by the government, they will be vulnerable to any indoctrination. They can easily say that there is no hope in this what we call government.
The Maute group is now battling it out with the Philippine military. As a result, President Rodridgo Duterete has imposed martial law across the region of Mindanao for the next few months. The government believes that an all-out offensive will mean the end for armed groups like the Maute, but many here believe that is simply not enough. Human Rights Watch say armed rebellion is also rooted from the failure of government to provide the basic needs. Mindanao has long been held back by poverty and war. And many here believe also that local leaders have failed to look after the youth here, who all say the same thing. They have largely been forgotten by society. Thousands of people have already fled from their homes since the fighting began just days ago.
We are sad to see this situation. Our children are just sleeping anywhere. We can't work, and it's a difficult life.
Most of the rebels fighting the military were like these children, displaced, their lives momentarily suspended because of a conflict. And so many here see the need to protect these children, so they will not have to suffer the same fate. Jamila Alandogan, Al Jazeera, Marawi City, Southern Philippines.
Before we bring in our panel, let's first speak to the spokesman of the Philippine military, Brigadier-General Restituto Padilla. General, thank you very much. What is President Duterte hoping to accomplish with martial law?
Well, the most important consideration is the restoration of the rule of law and order in the island of Mindanao. For quite some time now, there have been a series of violent activities, and some of these have been related to rebellious groups that have been trying to establish specific enclaves in the island of Mindanao. This series of activities has caused a series of disorders, and lawlessness has broken out in these areas, much to the disadvantage of many of our law-abiding citizens. Perhaps from our reading in the military, this is what is the most important consideration that the Commander-in-Chief has taken into causing for the forming or leading to the declaration of martial law.
Were there other options considered that perhaps aren't so heavy-handed?
Well, you cannot declare a certain emergency in a specific area if the supporting structures and the other members of this group are also present in other areas. And hence, the threat that we face spans through different provinces that need to be acted on from a bigger perspective and from both sides of Mindanao. If you have been monitoring the situation in this part of our country, we have had relentless and focused military operations in the area of Basilan, Zamboanga, Jolo, and Tawi-Tawi to answer these threats that have been coming from the kidnap for ransom group Abu Sayyaf. And lately, there have been a series of lawlessness happening in the areas of central Mindanao. Most of these have been perpetrated by armed groups belonging to these groups known as the BIFF, the AKP, and the Maute group, which lately have pledged allegiance to the Daesh. Now, this lawlessness is increasingly becoming a problem that we need to nip in the bud and act on.
Do you, your government has said that there are other fighters that are coming into the country to take advantage of the situation. What proof do you have of that?
We have had a series of operations previously that clearly indicated the presence of foreign fighters based on what we have recovered. We have been able to address this specifically and seen that many of them have been coming to the aid of these armed elements to encourage them to espouse radicalism and extremism and to take over certain parts of Mindanao as a caliphate of sort. This is something that is untenable for us, and we need to act on it. These armed groups need to be addressed, and these rebellious activities that have been going on in these areas are now going to a boil. They have been much more dauntless in their activities, and that is why part of this activity that has gone wrong in Marawi has led to this declaration. Earlier on, we were acting on an information that a leader of this group was present in the area, and we were about to effect an arrest together with elements of the police. Unfortunately, the place seems to have been taken over by quite a number of these rebellious groups and terrorists who may have been planning all along to take over the whole area.
General, President Duterte, I want to read to you something that he has said. He said, "I have always said, do not force my hand into it, because if I start to declare martial law, I will solve all the problems of Mindanao connected with law and order." And then he went on to say this, similar to Ferdinad Marcos, the dictator. What do you say to somebody in your country who doesn't feel good about that?
Well, many of those who are in Mindanao understand the situation they are in, being occupants of the island. And this breakdown of order in many of these parts that have been mentioned has been going on for quite some time. And we need to address that. And the other parts of the country are not covered, if I may say. It's only the island of Mindanao where a series of violent activities and rebellious events or incidents have occurred. So he, being an inhabitant or a resident of Mindanao, knows the dynamics that have been going on here. There has been a proliferation of loose firearms, many terrorist groups that have espoused allegiance to an international terrorist organization that has espoused radicalism and extremism, and the like. So this eruption of violent activities that have been related and connected to this group have also led to many other violent activities. So we want to take care of the peace and order. We want to restore law and order. We want to bring stability.
If I can ask then,
and hence
what,
the declaration.
if I can interrupt then what is the president's timeline for accomplishing this, for restoring law and order, as you have said?
Based on the Constitution, we have about 60 days to effect and bring about normalcy. So the document that we gathered from the declaration will provide us a 60-day period in order to effect many of these bringing back to normalcy in these violent areas.
Okay. General Padilla, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having us, and good evening.
Joining us now by Skype from Manila, Richard Heydarian, Professor of Political Science at Manila's Salle University. In Oxford, in the United Kingdom, Anders Corrs, Professor of Corrs Analytics. And in Bugao, Philippines, also joining us via Skype, Carey, Roque, member of the 17th Congress of the Philippines and a human rights activist. And thank you all for joining us. So we just wrapped up a conversation with the spokesman for the Philippines military, who continued to try to make the case that martial law was necessary. Do you buy that, Richard?
Well, I mean, the government of the Philippines is yet to provide us very specific justification for why it was martial law, not only a state of emergency, and why the entirety of Mindanao, not only in the Marawi region. So we're yet to see that kind of justification coming out of the government. But most likely the government has some intelligence report that suggests ISIS affiliate groups in the country are planning coordinated attacks, at least across Mindanao. Therefore, President Duterte had to take this quite draconian preemptive measure. But the fact of the matter is that the operationalization of the martial law is the more important question. And fortunately, the Department of National Defense came out with a set of guidelines yesterday, whereby they assured the citizens of Mindanao and the country in general that this martial law will not be, kind of a resuscitation of the draconian kind of order that was existing in the Philippines during the Marcos dictatorship, and that the basic civil liberties and political rights of the citizens will be respected. So maybe martial law sounds scary, but the devil is in the details, and the devil is in the implementation. And that's where the Philippine military has been so far more reassuring than being a source of concern.
Okay, having said that, Harry, how do you feel about the assurances that this is not going to be like it was before and that this is necessary, et cetera, et cetera? Do you buy that?
Well, you see, under the Philippine Constitution, there are only two grounds by which martial law can be declared, and one of them is rebellion. I think on the basis of what we've seen, there's been a public taking up of arms for the purpose of removing from allegiance of the Republic of the Philippines a portion of Marawi City. And therefore, I think it's apparent that the legal basis for the declaration of martial law is indeed present. However, martial law is never a pleasant thing. We've had a very bad experience with martial law during the time of the dictator Ferdinad Marcos. And what helps now assure the people that somehow this martial law will not be the same as the previous martial law are the institutional safeguards found in our 1987 Constitution. So unlike the Marcos dictatorship martial law, Congress remains open, the courts remains open, the 1987 Constitution remains effective, and the citizenry are protected by the Bill of Rights.
Anders, do you think that Congress is actually an adequate check on President Duterte now that martial law has been imposed?
Well, my understanding is that Duterte has the majority in Congress, and so there's not going to be much of a check there from the Philippine Congress. The concern from the international community is that this is in line with Duterte's general lean towards authoritarianism, whether it's his friendships with Russia and China, his avoidance of the U.S., even insulting U.S. leaders, and avoiding EU aid. I think the concern there is that this is as expected from someone who's increasing an authoritarian approach to politics in the Philippines. And I think that's a huge concern.
You talk about American leaders. Yes, he did have bad things to say about former President Barack Obama, but it seems that he and the current President Donald Trump have actually said very kind things about each other and to each other. What type of reaction would you like to get from the international community for there to be any type of check on this, Anders? And I will get back to you. I want you to answer that as well, Richard. But first, Anders.
Well, I guess the snub that I'm talking about in terms of Trump is that Trump has very clearly invited Duterte to the White House, and there's not been a reciprocal invitation or an acceptance of the invitation. So I think that's seen as a snub by some analysts.
And even still,
I mean, I think that is a concern.
And even though, you're right, even though he did not accept, they still had a conversation just a few days ago where Donald Trump continued to compliment him on his leadership style.
So one would expect that given all those concessions from Trump and that friendliness and that taking the first step from Trump, that Duterte would have responded positively. The fact that he didn't respond positively suggests that it's not the fact that we were going after the drug war and the human rights issues that makes Duterte lean towards Russia and China. It may be something else. It may be economic, the aid that Duterte is hoping to get from China.
Richard, what type of reaction do you expect from the international community to this martial law, particularly if it continues to stay in place?
Well, I mean, first of all, something very interesting happened, right? Duterte was in Russia to pivot the Philippines to the east, trying to diversify away from the United States and the European Union, who have criticized his war on drugs, his human rights record. And yet now in Mindanao, the very entities that have helped the Philippines the most are the European Union through investment in the peace process and the United States through counter-terror cooperation. And the response from the White House was very supportive, was very conciliatory. In fact, the White House immediately said that we stand strong with the Philippines and, quote unquote, we are a proud ally of the Philippines. And I'm not sure if Duterte completely snubbed Trump. In fact, from what I know from my sources at the highest level in the government, there is a plan for Duterte to visit the White House later this year, probably in September, October. And in November, Trump is going to come to Manila for the East Asia Summit. And most likely, the two sides are going to patch up their differences. So now Duterte perhaps has to stop kind of insulting the West and be more pragmatic and realistic and try to seek their assistance with dealing with the problem in Mindanao, because this ISIS problem is not going to go away. It's just going to get worse. We have reports that suggest there were foreign fighters among the Maute groups. So it seems that the problem in Mindanao is becoming internationalized, and international jihadi groups could join along later on if this problem is not dealt with right away. I think that is why the martial law declaration in Mindanao will get support from the Philippine Congress and the broader population.
All right. So I want to.
It will be spread to the country. There will be opposition against that.
Okay, I want to talk about what you're saying about ISIL fighters. Anders, how significant is the presence of ISIL and ISIL sympathizers in the Philippines and the impact that they're having?
Well, my understanding from reporting is that ISIS, because it's so focused on Raqqa, Mosul, Iraq, Syria, is actually pulling back some of its support from international groups. Now, as far as I know, there's no evidence that's come out to show that ISIS or ISIL is financially supporting the insurgents in Mindanao. I don't see that they're being operationally controlled by ISIS abroad. The insurgency in Mindanao, or the unrest there, has lasted for quite a long time. And past administrations have dealt with that insurgency in other ways that aren't using martial law, and not only using martial law, but then following that up by threatening to spread martial law based on that to all of the Philippines, for example. So I think it's a very dangerous thing, and there's so much smoke here in terms of authoritarian, the increase of authoritarianism, that I think it's maybe we've gone too far by declaring martial law. Maybe this could have been done with regular police methods or even regular military methods to root out the insurgency without taking away rights of individuals.
Harry, considering what the things that President Duterte himself has said when it comes to extrajudicial killings and killing drug dealers, these are things that he himself is on the record claiming to have done. When you couple that with the fact that he's now declared martial law, what concerns do you have for just the average person in the Philippines?
Well, you see, the declaration of martial law, any way you look at it, is worrisome. No? We now have the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus, the most effective tool to protect liberty, effectively suspended in Mindanao. No? And that should be reason for alarm bells, particularly for libertarians. But what I'm saying now is we have a case of first impression. This is the first time that we have an extended declaration of martial law since the new constitution. And as I said, the 1987 constitution is precisely a reactionary document in response to the dark experience of the Philippines under martial law. And that's why Congress remains open, the courts remains open, the Bill of Rights remains operative. No? And it's also very important to highlight that although the privilege of the writ is suspended, it is only suspended for cases involving the purported grounds for the declaration of martial law, and that's basically rebellion and invasion. No? So all other crimes are subject still to habeas corpus. No? So they can only detain individuals, and these individuals will be bereft of a legal remedy if it's in connection with the ongoing rebellion that became the basis for the declaration of martial law.
Richard, in your opinion, is there a component of taking this action that is more political than, let me just leave it at that. Do you think there's a component to this that it's political?
Well, I mean, definitely. I think as far as President Duterte is concerned, my reading of him is that he wants maximum possible legal leeway to deal what he believes are the major national conundrum, whether it's the drug issue, whether it's the terrorism issue in Mindanao. I think he wants the maximum leeway and has been very open about it. But President Duterte says one thing, he prefers one thing. The Duterte administration in general doesn't necessarily always follow what Duterte says or what Duterte wants. That's why I think it's important to also emphasize the role of the Philippine military. And this is a military that has gone through a long process of internalizing democratic rights. It is actually tasked with protecting the Philippine constitution, not just following the president blindly. And so far, the efforts I see from the Philippine defense establishment is to reassure people that this martial law is not a revival of the kind of horrific scenario the Philippines was facing during the Marcos period. And as I said, if Duterte wants to take the martial law on a nationwide basis, I expect opposition within the Philippine Congress. You already have several senators, including those allied to President Duterte, openly saying there's absolutely no basis for martial law all across the country. And up to this point, it's actually still debatable whether the martial law was correct or not. Because, I mean, some talk about rebellion. I kind of agree there's an element of rebellion here. But the government also talks about the element of invasion because there are certain foreign fighters there. So I think they have to make it very clear what exactly is the basis for this. Is it invasion? Is it rebellion? Is it both? And but I think as long as this is just in Mindanao, I think the Philippine Congress and the Philippine public will go along with it. But once it goes beyond Mindanao, that's where there's going to be.
So Anders, where are we? Fast forward to 60 days when the authorization for this is allegedly runs out or is challenged. Where are we in 60 days from now? What do you think?
Well, that'll be the question, whether the Philippine Congress reaffirms that martial law, because they can keep it going for as long as they would like to do so. The interesting thing is that the Congress has the opportunity now to cancel the martial law, which I personally think would probably be a good idea given the circumstances. The other question I would have is, was this martial law initiated by the generals and by the military in Mindanao because they told Duterte, hey, we really need this extra tool, we really need to suspend habeas corpus for certain citizens, or was this something that was initiated by Duterte? I did not see the military calling for martial law before Duterte announced martial law. So to me, that's quite problematic.
Okay, well, we will have to see how this all continues to play out. And gentlemen, thank you all for the discussion. Appreciate it very much. I'm sure we'll be calling on all of you again. Thank you to the Brigadier-General who joined us at the top of the show, Restituto Padilla, Richard Heydarian, Andrews Corrs, and Harry Roque. And thank you for watching as well. You can watch the program anytime. If you go to our website, it's aljazeera.com. Also, for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, and you can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Richelle, Carey, the entire team. Bye for now.